Hello and welcome to First Force Live, where we bring you the day's top 4 stories from across the world. Let's begin with the headlines. China's President Xi Jinping meets Taiwan's opposition party leader in Beijing, telling the visiting delegation he had full confidence that Taiwanese and Chinese people would be united in the near future. In Beijing, Cap de White. Myanmar's Ha Chief is sworn in as president, continuing his rule from a civilian post 5 years after snatching power in a military coup. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he wants energy sanctions to be reinstated on Russia following the U.S.-Iran truce meant to ease the Hormuz shutdown. The U.S. First Lady Melania Trump makes a surprise statement denying any knowledge of late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. She says the lies linking her with him need to end today. And the 4 Artemis astronauts head for a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, returning from the world's first crewed moon voyage in over half a century. Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has broken his silence 3 days after the ceasefire, and he has vowed to take revenge. Tensions in West Asia may be quieter on the ground, but the rhetoric is only hardening. Mojtaba Khamenei has said the country remains committed to avenging the killing of its top leadership, marking 40 days since the killing of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He described it as a grave act and warned of a strong response. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed on the first day of the U.S.-Israeli strikes on February 28th. Since then, successive strikes have targeted key figures with Iran's leadership, marking a sharp escalation and weakening its command structure. In a statement, Mojtaba said Iran had astonished the world during the conflict, adding that Tehran is not seeking war, but will defend its rights. He has not been seen in public since assuming the role of supreme leader. Many reports claim that he was hurt in the strikes that killed his father. Mujahid warned that those responsible for the attacks will not go unpunished and said Iran will seek compensation for the damage and loss of life. He also indicated a possible shift in strategy, saying Iran could move to a new phase in managing the state of Hormuz, raising concerns over global energy supplies. His remarks come just days after U.S.-Iran ceasefire, but disagreements over its scope continue. While Iran and Pakistan insist Lebanon is part of the truce, the U.S. and Israel maintain that it is not. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has criticized Israel's strikes on Lebanon, calling them a violation of the ceasefire and warning they could derail peace efforts. Meanwhile, Israel has made its position clear. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there is no ceasefire in Lebanon and vowed to continue operations against Hezbollah. He has also signaled openness to diplomacy, saying Israel is ready for direct talks with Lebanon, focused on disarming Hezbollah and seeking a peace agreement. Following repeated appeals from the Lebanese government to enter into peace negotiations with us. Last night, I instructed the cabinet to open direct negotiations with Lebanon in order to achieve 2 goals. 1, the disarmament of Hezbollah. 2, a historic sustainable peace agreement between Israel and Lebanon. Shield. With diplomacy unfolding on 2 fronts, all eyes are on high-stakes talks that could reshape the region. In Islamabad, tight security is in place as Pakistan prepares to host U.S.-Iran negotiations. At the same time, diplomatic efforts continue with Israel and Lebanon expected to hold talks in Washington next week. With stances hardening and the ceasefire still uncertain, the region faces a critical moment between conflict and calm. As the shaky ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran enters day 3, the Strait of the Hormuz remains at the center of the ongoing crisis. In the latest, President Donald Trump has accused Iran of doing a very poor job of allowing oil to pass through Hormuz, calling it a breach of the ceasefire understanding. He has also warned Tehran against imposing any toll on ships, even as earlier remarks from his side hinted at a possible joint mechanism. Trump says oil will flow through Hormuz with or without Iran from Tehran. The response is more measured. The new Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei says Iran does not seek to extend the war, but he has made it clear that Iran will not give up what it considers its sovereign rights, a position that directly includes control over Hormuz. In peacetime, nearly a fifth of the world's oil and gas flows through this narrow stretch of water, making Hormuz not just a shipping lane, but a lifeline for the global economy. But since the first U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, access through the strait has been tightly restricted by Thrawn. Ships have faced approval processes, limited routes, and heightened security risks. Under the ceasefire terms, reopening Hormuz was a key condition. Iran initially agreed but restricted access through Hormuz again in response to Israel's ongoing strikes on Lebanon. And the numbers just show how limited the reopening has been. Since the ceasefire took effect, only 10 vessels have passed through the strait, including just 4 oil tankers. That's a sharp drop from normal levels, with traffic still down by nearly 90%. Hundreds of ships remain struck on either side, and most of the movement so far has been linked to Iran or friendly countries. Iran is now adding another layer to its control, a proposed toll-based system for ships crossing the strait. According to multiple reports, vessels could be charged up to $2 million per transit, or roughly $1 per barrel of oil, with some indications that payments may be demanded in cryptocurrency or Chinese yuan. The Iranian state media is justifying it as a way to fund reconstruction, but it is also sparking global concern over the precedent it could set. We are here to actually pronounce what the law actually says. And international law provides for the freedom of navigation, which means what it means, basically no payment or toll whatsoever. Again, the Strait Line and the Strait of Hormuz, like any other maritime lane, is a public good for all humanity, which means what? Which means that the navigation must be free. So where does this leave the situation? A ceasefire that's barely holding a critical waterway that remains tightly controlled, and rising tension over who ultimately decides the rules of the passage. And even as the ceasefire between Iran and the U.S. is dominating the headlines, fresh attacks have been reported in Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, too, has flagged its oil sites that have been targeted in the past. This is now raising questions about how far the region is far from stability. Satellite imagery now shows smoke plumes rising from Saudi's critical oil plant on Wednesday. This pipeline is critical as it is currently Saudi Arabia's only route for exporting crude oil. Saudi ministry did not specify who launched the attacks, but the country has intercepted many Iranian missiles and drones in recent weeks. Authorities say the attacks have reduced the kingdom's oil production capacity by around 600,000 barrels per day, while also cutting output on the east-west pipeline by nearly 700,000 barrels per day. The system was transporting around 7 million barrels per day from the kingdom's eastern oil fields to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. This route had become even more important after the Strait of Hormuz was effectively shut, trapping large volumes of oil and gas in the Gulf. The impact of these attacks reflected in global markets. Oil prices climbed as fresh concerns emerged over supply disruptions from Saudi Arabia. Analysts now warn that continued strikes and uncertainty can further affect the markets. The initial wave of relief following President Trump's 2-week ceasefire announcement has quickly given way to underlying doubts. All eyes remain firmly on tanker tracker flows through the Strait of Hormuz for any signs of increased activity ahead of peace talks scheduled in Pakistan on Friday. In the latest, Kuwait has also confirmed that drones were fired towards its territory, causing significant damage. According to Kuwaiti National Guard, one of its sites was targeted. Reports claim that drones were aimed at critical infrastructure, including vital installations across the country. Just a day before this incident, Kuwait reported that its air defenses intercepted a wave of Iranian drones. The defense ministry stated that a total of 28 drones were dealt with during what it described as intense hostile attacks. The air defenses in the armed forces are currently dealing with hostile attacks from drones that have penetrated the country's airspace, targeting a number of vital facilities. Kuwait's Interior Ministry later confirmed that several important facilities, including those linked to the Kuwait Petroleum Cooperation and the Energy and Water Ministry, suffered severe material damage. Now, these developments come against the backdrop of a broader regional conflict. Gulf countries have been under sustained attack from Iranian missiles and drones since the war began. Iran had earlier said it views U.S. bases in the neighboring countries as legitimate targets. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps even claimed responsibility for strikes across the region, including targets they described as oil facilities linked to the U.S. companies. These developments have raised the tensions in West Asia, especially after the truce announcement. All eyes are now on the talks in Islamabad as the world waits to see whether this ceasefire can actually hold. Moving on to our next story. Pakistan's defense minister has launched a scathing attack on Israel over its strikes in Lebanon, triggering a sharp response from Israel's top leadership at a time when the ceasefire is under strain. Pakistan's defense minister ASF, in a post on X, called Israel evil and a curse for humanity, accusing it of committing genocide in Lebanon amid ongoing peace talks. He said innocent civilians were being killed, adding that violence has continued from Gaza to Iran and now Lebanon. The post has now been deleted. Asaf's remarks came after Pakistan's foreign ministry had already condemned Israeli military actions in Lebanon. His statements marked a significant escalation in rhetoric directly targeting Israel during a sensitive diplomatic phase where Islamabad is scheduled to host the peace talks. Israel responded strongly. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the remarks outrageous and said such statements cannot be tolerated, especially from a country positioning itself as a neutral mediator. Even Israel's foreign minister Gideon Saar has strongly pushed back against Pakistan's remarks. Israel views very gravely these blatant anti-Semitic blood libels from a government claiming to mediate peace. Calling the Jewish state cancerous is effectively calling for its annihilation. Israel will defend itself against terrorists who vow its destruction. Meanwhile, this comes as Netanyahu has said his government is ready to hold direct talks with Lebanon. He said the negotiations would focus on disarming Hezbollah and working towards peaceful relations. However, the situation on ground remains dire. As of Thursday, Israel's military want residents in Beirut's southern suburbs to evacuate ahead of possible strikes. The area is known as a stronghold of Hezbollah. This comes a day after Israel carried out some of its deadliest strikes in Lebanon, triggering a major escalation. In response, Hezbollah also fired rockets into northern Israel. Israel and the United States maintain that Lebanon is not part of the two-week truce. While Iran and Pakistan say it should be included, adding another layer to the situation, Iranian media reports that Tehran may suspend its upcoming talks with the United States in Islamabad if Israel continues its military operations in Lebanon. The U.S. and Iran had agreed to a two-week ceasefire just hours before Donald Trump's deadline for military action. The last-minute deal reportedly followed calls with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Aimunir, who had pushed for a truce. With tensions rising and the ceasefire under strain, the region stands at a critical juncture where diplomacy and conflict are moving side by side. The standoff between Donald Trump and Pope Leo XIV is out in the open. The U.S. defense establishment has responded to claims that Trump officials delivered a bitter lecture to Catholic Church back in January for not backing America's military actions. The report says the Vatican was asked to fall in line with a clear message. The U.S. has the military power to do whatever it wants. In other words, the American expectation from Vatican was clear. Support its military plan, or at least don't publicly oppose it. Washington, however, is dismissing that account, insisting that there was no attempt to intimidate the church and calling the meeting routine respectful. The diplomatic friction, which began in a closed room last winter, came out in full public view during war on Iran. As the 40-day conflict unfolded, Trump's hardline posture, including a warning that Iran's civilization could be wiped out, drew a sharp response from the Vatican. Today, as we all know, there has also been this threat against the entire people of Iran, and this is truly unacceptable. There are certainly issues of international law here, but even more so, a moral issue for the good of the whole entire population. And I would like to invite everyone to truly think in their hearts about the many innocent people, so many children, so many elderly, completely innocent, who would also become victims of this escalation of a war that began from the very first days. As we were saying, this wasn't diplomatic caution from Vatican. It was a direct rebuke at Donald Trump, a warning that war isn't just strategic choice, it's a moral one. Let those who have weapons lay them down. Let those who have the power to unleash wars choose peace. Not a peace imposed by force, but through dialogue. Not with the desire to dominate others, but to encounter them. Now, here's where the contrast sharpens. Trump's politics, especially within the MAGA movement, often carry a strong religious undertone. Faith, nationalism, and military strength frequently overlap. Even within his administration, calls have been made to pray for victory in war, but Pope Leo is drawing a clear line. Faith cannot be used to justify conflict. At the same time, he's leaving the door open. I'm told that President Trump recently stated that he would like to end the war. Hopefully, he's looking for an off-ramp. Hopefully, he's looking for a way to decrease the amount of violence of bombing, which would be a significant contribution to removing the hatred that's being created and that's increasing constantly in the Middle East and elsewhere. So what we are seeing is a clear rift between Donald Trump's security doctrine and Pope Leo's moral pushback, and that divide is only growing with each passing day. That's all for now. Thank you for joining us. I am Gushin Gallen, and we'll see you right back here for more updates at First Live at 3. Until then, stay informed and stay tuned to First Post. Want the facts, the latest developments, news that gets straight to the point? Well, we've got all three just for you. This is First Post Live, a brand new show. Your window into what really matters. Don't miss it. The world moves fast. Power shifts, unexpected developments, changing alliances. Every day brings a new headline. But headlines are only the beginning. Because behind every story, there is context. There are consequences and there are questions worth asking. Find the answers. Understand the story. Take on the world. This is Himoria for First Post Vantage.